What is up, guys? Welcome to my review of the latest Valentine's Day slasher film, Heart Eyes. Sorry this is coming to you a few days later than it normally would. The movie dropped the weekend that I was leaving out to LA. Got to attend the Critics' Choice Awards. Very cool experience. Maybe I'll talk about that again later on in a Q&A or something. But this was the first chance that I had to check this thing out. And I honestly didn't know what to expect from this one. I didn't know much about it aside from the title and a few of the cast members. I never watched the trailer or looked into the movie at all. I tend to do that with most horror films nowadays. But it's got a very mixed response in this first weekend. Some people absolutely loving it, some people not really caring too much for it. And so I was very curious where I was going to land on this one. I love the idea of holiday slashers. When they're good, they're awesome, but my hit rate with them isn't so great. I tend to find most of them are a bit underwhelming, even with this holiday itself. I'm the rare breed that has never really cared too much for the My Bloody Valentine movies. I actually like the 3D one more than the original. Shoot me. Never thought that Valentine from back in the early 2000s was all that great. So held out hope. Maybe Heart Eyes is going to be a Valentine's Day slasher I can actually get behind. And the plot of this movie surrounds Valentine's Day, where there is a killer out there called the Heart Eyes Killer, or HEK as they mostly call him, who every single year goes on a killing spree in a different city. And our two main characters are just co-workers who end up locking lips because of a set of circumstances and unknowingly put themselves in the path of the Heart Eyes Killer, even though they are not a couple. And so hilarity and carnage ensues. And what's really interesting about this movie, and I don't know how it was marketed, I haven't watched the trailer yet, I'll find out whenever I go to edit this video, but this is not a traditional slasher film. This is very much like a tried and true romantic comedy that suddenly has these extremely gory slasher elements thrown into it. They're very much trying to go for two polar opposite types of films, two polar opposite subgenres of films, and blending them into one. So did Heart Eyes work? Did they get the mix right? Is this finally a Valentine's Day slasher that's going to be a yearly watch for me? Well, really quick before I answer those questions, while we might be running away from a Heart Eyes killer every single Valentine's Day, a threat that's looming over all of us is identity theft. So protect yourself by using the sponsor of today's video, Aura. 2024 saw a number of high-profile data breaches from big names like Dell, Ticketmaster, and United Health. Most alarming of all, just a few months ago, National Public Data said that they had a breach that could potentially affect every single American. Nearly 3 billion records used for background checks that include full names, addresses, dates of birth, phone numbers, and even social security numbers. And you guessed it, the hackers released all of this information online for free. So needless to say, we are all more vulnerable than ever. But luckily, the sponsor of today's video, Aura, is here to help. Aura monitors your personal data across billions of data points like the dark web and public court records to keep you alerted about potential identity theft. Aura also offers a variety of other features like real-time data breach alerts, a VPN for safe browsing, a password manager, and they'll even submit opt-out requests to the data brokers leaking your personal information. Legally, these data brokers do have to remove your information if you request them to do so, but they make it extremely difficult for you to do that. So just offload all of that hard work and stress onto Aura. I value my privacy, and if you value yours, you can go to aura.com/Cody Leach or click the link in the video description to start your 2-week free trial today. And thank you so much to Aura for sponsoring today's video. Starting off with the positives for Heart Eyes, I really liked the idea and the concept that they were going for here, where you have a Valentine's Day film where out of every single day of the year is the most traditional day for a couple to go out and watch a movie. And stereotypically, you have one person in the relationship that likes action movies or bloody slasher films, while you have the other one that likes romantic comedies and dramas and period pieces and things like that. So a movie trying to take two polar opposite subgenres and basically put as much of each of those subgenres into the mix to try to appeal to both sides of the couple equally. And I was surprised how well they made that mix work, where you have a film that is so inherently focused on being this meet cute scenario and having these two star-crossed people become the perfect match for each other, and all the trials and tribulations that they go through and all the little lovey-dovey moments. You got a brilliant soundtrack, by the way, that just matches all of that and all the really cutesy moments. And then out of nowhere, you're reminded immediately that you are in a hard R slasher film. And at no point did the tonal shift of swinging between those two different subgenres ever feel like whiplash to me. It kind of felt like a really fun and welcome version of a tonal clash. And while I enjoy the odd romantic comedy, there's certainly some good ones and some bad ones, like every subgenre of film, but I'm primarily coming into here for the slasher elements. And for as much of this movie that is focused on the romantic comedy side, I was eating good as a slasher fan. There's a really cool killer in here with the look of the Hard Eyes killer, with the imposing threat, just the physical threat that he gives on screen. The carnage candy in this movie is pretty damn awesome. I do think there's a little bit of a lull in the middle. The movie shoots its shot very early on, and then it feels like it's a while before we get anything that's up to that level of carnage again. But that notwithstanding, overall, there's a good amount of kills, and a number of them are very, very gory, really good effects. I'm sure it was a mix of practical and CGI, but it was the mix where it's not distracting if there is some computer-generated blood and gore in there. And it's always a huge surprise, a very welcome surprise for me when we get the odd slasher film that actually tries to push the creativity with the kills, not just your traditional slashings and stabbings and decapitations. This killer's got a little more creativity, a little more sickness in them, and I like that. Pretty much all the way around, the cast here is great. Olivia Holt and Mason Gooding are your two co-leads here, the couple that is in this really crazy situation, and I like both of them. I don't think I've seen much out of Olivia Holt, but she's an enjoyable character that is very complicated because she's so abrasive and she's so against the grain at first, and then slowly kind of becomes a character that you understand and warm to as the movie goes on. Mason Gooding, I just really enjoy. You know, despite my thoughts about the bullshit about his character's fate in Scream 6 and maybe even a little bit in Scream 5, I like his screen presence. I think he's got star power. I think he's got that quality to him. So he's an enjoyable co-lead here. He's got that charm to him for a role like this, whether it's a slasher film or a romantic comedy. He does good at both sides of that. And what I enjoyed about their dynamic is that this is a screwball comedy. This is a comedy where it's essentially the battle of the sexes version of a romance film, where they don't necessarily get along so well for the majority of the movie, but all of that argument, all of the trials and tribulations and the fighting between them kind of makes them really like and warm to each other. So it's not often you get to see movies like that anymore. You used to get a lot of them back in the 90s and even the early 2000s, but it's been a while since I've seen one, and I like those versions of romantic comedies, and these two leads do well with that version of comedy. And one element of the comedy that I thought was done really well is the use of sound editing to have like background gags and background jokes throughout most of the film. And I made a reference to this when I recently reviewed Kinda Pregnant. Don't recommend you check out that movie, but one of the few things I liked about it is that they utilized that element of comedy that seems like it really kind of went away after the 2000s, where you have something happening on screen, you have characters that are the forefront of what you're looking at, but there's something that's said in the background, or there's like a little joke that sneaks into the sound mix that is almost like a hidden little Easter egg. If you catch it, it's hilarious. If you don't, it's not, you know, it's not detrimental to miss it. It's just something you usually pick up on repeat watches. And there was a number of times in this movie where something funny was happening or being said, or some kind of a sound effect in the background that was just like complimentary to whatever was going on screen. So I got a good amount of chuckles out of that. And the last thing that I'll say here in this segment is that I thought the first act of this movie was genuinely firing on all cylinders. Like for the first 10 to 15 minutes, I was like, oh wow, I'm going to absolutely love this. This is a blast. Now, with me saying that, that hints very directly that I have some significant issues with the rest of the film that we're going to get into, but I think that this film does have franchise potential, and if they are successful enough to make this into a franchise, I hope they harness a little bit more about what was working so well in the first 30 minutes or so of the movie versus where some of the directions that they went in the later parts of the film. And now moving on to the negatives, and unfortunately, for as much as certain elements of the comedy in this film did work for me, they did way too much of it, especially in the second and third act. I think there was a good balance in the first act of the film, but once the plot of the movie really kicks into high gear and the second act starts, it's like shotgun style with the comedy writing. It's every minute or so somebody's going for a funny line, or they're doing a physical gag, or they're trying to put some situational humor even into a scene that's supposed to be super tense. And so when you do that, unless you are a phenomenal comedy writer, and Christopher Landon's one of the writers here, and I enjoy his work, so there are some good people working in this, but unless you are just like really good with your hit ratio with comedy, you really drop the amount of comedy that's working overall. You'll have some good laughs, but you'll have so many more that are just dead on arrival, that are misses. And so it brings the whole movie down a bit, where you could have just trimmed out a bit of that humor and had your best jokes be the ones that really hit hard. And instead, they're just like throwing everything at the wall. Every little comedic idea that they have, they throw in there. And so the success rate of the comedy, despite having some genuinely good laughs, was low for me in this one.
Happy V-Day!
Get killed, all right. What was...
Why would he say that?
It's also a big issue when you are still trying to kind of have your cake and eat it too, with having a screwball comedy, but having a really dark, serious, hard R, bloody, gory slasher film with a killer that's genuinely intimidating. And so there's a number of sequences in this movie where the tone should be shifting more to being tension and being a little bit more on your edge. And it's killed by a joke, it's killed by a bit, it's killed by a funny line. Even in situations where it's like, these characters should not be making quips right now, they make quips. And so it just takes all of the air out of any tension that they're trying to achieve. And so while I love the concept that they're going for, and I think that they're very successful at blending the tones, I just wish they balanced out the comedy better. I referenced this in Companion, when I was talking about how great they got the mix, because horror comedies for me tend to lean too hard on one or the other. They're either trying to be a serious slasher and just don't have very good comedy and they seem kind of awkward with their jokes, or they go full on the comedy and the kills are never really all that exciting or intense. And that was one of those films that I feel like got the mix right. This one got the mix wrong. And so for as much as I love and especially respect their attempts at blending comedy, romance, and slasher in here, I think their blend of romance and slasher was almost perfect. But their mix of comedy into the heart eyes stew, if you will, they had a bit of a heavy hand with that one. The cap fell off and the whole fucking thing dumped in. On that note, I think two characters that really got the short end of the stick here is Devon Sawa and Jordana Brewster's characters. They're the two detectives who are pursuing the Heart Eyes killer. A number of the jokes that they went for with them really didn't work for me. I don't blame the actors for that. It's really just a writing issue, but I wish I would have gotten more out of those two characters. And the last thing that I'll say in the negatives, and I'm not going to give any specificity whatsoever, even though there's people online who are hell-bent on spoiling this out of some kind of protest on Twitter. The reveals of the killer, both the identity and the motive, I wasn't a huge fan of. And that's something that is a very big element of a whodunit style slasher film. When you're waiting for the big reveal, you're waiting for the mask to come off, you're waiting to hear why they do this. For me, that's just as important as the look of the killer for how iconic they're going to end up being. And when we got our answer, I didn't feel like it was all that interesting. I was very underwhelmed by the ultimate reveals in the third act of the film. But overall, guys, I had a good time with this one. I don't think it's quite a knockout, but I think there's a lot of potential to do better with the second film. I like the way that they're trying to do a bit of a genre blender here. I just wish they eased up on the amount of comedy that they had, or at least got a little bit better comedy if they're going to go that hard with it. But overall, I think it's a really fun movie to go out for Valentine's Day with your significant other to check it out. So check it out and let me know what you thought about it. Well, that's it for this one, guys. Be sure to check out Aura in the video description below. If you enjoyed this, click over here for all the rest of my 2025 new release reviews so far. And I'm also going to put a tier list up here where I ranked all of the holiday slasher films that I have seen thus far. Like, share, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss everything in the future. And as always, remember, opinions are like assholes, but that doesn't mean you have to be.